Hello and welcome to Otterwood Cottage, where we're building our dream smallholding in the heart of the Lincolnshire countryside. I'm Emma and we're delighted to have you along with us. Well, we have had quite the week this week. You know those weeks where if it's going to go wrong, it seems to go wrong. So we had, poor little miss was really poorly, and so we lost, she's at college 3 hours away from home. So we lost 2 days, one going to pick her up and one to take her back yesterday when she was starting to feel a bit better, thankfully. So she's had a difficult week. We had the microwave broke, the washing machine broke, neither of which we can seem to be able to resurrect, and neither of which we really want to be spending out to replace. And then I came down with little Mrs. Flu-like symptoms and was feeling pretty rotten for most of the week. So it's been one of those weeks where we have done what we needed to do to get through and very little beyond. But having said that, there is still stuff to catch you up on. So when I left you at the end of last week's video where I gave you the update to the year in review, which has by far been my favourite video to make so far. I think it was a quick one to make, but lots of fun and really positive for us to look back and see everything we've achieved over the last year. And thank you for all of you that have commented and said lovely things on that video. We really do appreciate all your help and support. So as soon as I finished that video, I made a start on clearing the patch where the corn had been and the squash was still growing. So I took out our temperamental wood chipper and use that to chip the corn stalks, spread those out over the area. Take a look at how that went. Worst purchase ever. And then from there we bought the squash in to the polytunnel to cure off. Of the two types that we grew, we had butternut squash and we had crookneck squash, which is a summer squash. The crookneck squash has been a little bit, we're reserving judgment because we've only opened one up, but we've been a little bit disappointed with the crookneck because the skin is really thick and there's not a great deal of flesh in there. The flesh that is in there is tasty enough, nothing particularly special, and it may be to do with the dryness of the year this year. Perhaps they didn't swell as much as they should have. I've got a drip on my head from condensation from inside the polytunnel. The butternut squash, on the other hand, appear to have really bulked up. We're really pleased with the size of those. We haven't yet cut into one of those. We're letting those cure before we cut into one. So judgment reserved on both until we know for sure. But at the minute, I'm leaning towards a different type of squash for next year. We're hoping to do more. You may recall I felt I hadn't grown anywhere near enough squash this year, and certainly not enough different types of variety. Something I'm seeing lots of other people grow is mashed potato squash, which I think I'd really like to try and get hold of some seeds for. They sound delicious and seem to be quite prolific from other people's channels. So I'd definitely like to give those a go, and perhaps another couple of varieties whilst we're still experimenting and learning what we like and what grows well here. But I think all being well, that the butternut squash tastes nice, I will save some seed from that and we will definitely grow the butternut squash again. And once we open up the other crookneck, if there are a couple that are decent, we perhaps grow 1 or 2 plants, but they certainly haven't been something that we've been blown away by so far. So the squash and the corn is now all down, all cleared, and I have covered that up with black plastic for now, letting the chippings that we put through the chipper just rot down into the soil and add some goodness to the soil there. And on soil, we've had a really lovely bit of news, which is our lovely neighbour at the farm up the road who keeps a horse has said that we can have access to the manure pile that they've been collecting for I don't know how many years. So there is some fantastic black gold, well-rotted manure up there, as well as fresh manure being collected every day. Which they don't use and which we can have as much as we like of. So we're really, really excited about that, because we were looking at our compost making efforts for this year, which, as you know, we've not managed to get around to building the compost bays. That's going to be a job for this winter. So we do have a big pile, but we've not really been paying as much attention to it as we should. And I'm kicking myself because I know the importance of good quality compost. But it's probably not going to be there for us in good enough quantity or quality to use this year on the beds. So we were thinking perhaps we might have to buy some more in, but it's so expensive to do that, we really didn't want to. And so this is going to be a fantastic alternative. And then we'll find other organic matter, grass clippings and other things on the property to avoid having to buy in bulk compost again. So that's a really fantastic piece of news that we've got access to that resource, and we're very grateful to our neighbours for offering it. In other news this week, in fact the last few weeks, maybe the last 3 weeks, we have been bringing in the dried beans as we've seen them drying on the vine. So we're not cutting the whole thing down and hanging it upside down to dry, which I know is one way of drying off your beans. We have been instead allowing the pods to dry on the vine. It's still dry enough, it's not got wet, they're not going mouldy yet. So initially when we were podding tons at once and had trays everywhere, so the way we've been doing it is picking them when they're dry, podding them, and then to make doubly sure they are 100% dry and we don't get any spoilage in the jars, we've been laying them out on trays just in the warm kitchen to dry off fully for a week or two before we pop them in the jars. So the jars are slowly filling up, and we are taking fewer and fewer now. Each couple of days we come out, pick the ones that are dry, pod them, and they're diminishing now in terms of the quantity that we're getting in. So we're close to the end, with the exception of the Jacob's cattle and the lazy housewife, both of which aren't showing any signs of drying yet. They're still very green on the pod. So we're going to have to make a judgment call at some point. If it starts to get very wet and humid out here, then we'll have to hang them upside down to dry off, probably in here. But otherwise we'll just wait for them to dry on the pods. So that has been quite a nice family task. We've sat around the dining room table and podded together while we're chatting. It's been quite an enjoyable thing to do. What I have realised though is I thought we'd grown quite a lot of beans, but if you look at the picture of how many we've gathered from, we've probably taken in, I'd say probably 60% of the beans that are available are already in and dried and in those jars. There's really not a lot of beans once you pod and dry and pop them in the jars. And we do want a good supply of dried beans for our pantry. Little Miss is a vegetarian, so it's a fantastic source of protein. We enjoy them. We particularly enjoy cowboy beans, which we can make with them, but all kinds of beans to be added to stews and casseroles and soups and so on. So next year, I think what we're going to do is use a significant proportion of the beans we've gathered in this year, forego having them in our food in as many in the quantity we perhaps might like, and use those instead to replant, but go big on the beans next year, have a lot more of them. I'll have to think about where we might do that. And I might grow fewer varieties but more of them. So the Greek Gigantes, for example, I think I want to do that whole row where I had all the different peas and beans along the fence. This year I'd like to do all of that as Greek Gigantes, because the butter beans are really useful and valuable in our cooking. And then for the smaller beans, I think I will stick to bush beans, because then we can put them kind of in the ground all over the property. I don't need climbing space for those. So I think that's probably what we're going to do with beans next year. And we are in that stage now of there's still lots coming in harvest wise, but we're starting to think about what we've learnt this year, what we're going to do differently next year, as I'm sure many of you are. It's got, as we turn into the autumn and the nights are drawing in and you have less time outside in the evening, we're spending a lot more time thinking about celebrating the successes this year, what we're going to do the same, and what are we going to do different. So on that note, one of the other things I've been doing this week is starting to save the seed from our tomatoes. So we grow 5 varieties and have done and saved seed from those 5 varieties for the last 4 years now, and that's the Aurora, the Latar, now I know how to say it, the Chadwick Cherry, the Aurora Latar, Chadwick Cherry, the Orange Banana, and the Garnet. The Garnet and the Chadwick Cherry are both salad cherry varieties. The Orange Banana is a salad tomato, although it is also good in sauces. And then the Latars and the Auroras are sauce tomatoes, bigger sauce tomatoes. 90% of the use we've made of our tomatoes this year has been for sauces. We do eat them fresh, but the Auroras and the Latars are delicious as fresh eating tomatoes as well, and chopped up in our salads. So I'm going to, I think, although I'm not going to not grow them at all, because I do want to keep saving the seed each year, because we do enjoy them as a tomato, I think I'm going to do maybe just 1 or 2 plants of the cherries, as opposed to 4 each, which is what we had this year. Maybe just 1 or 2 of the Orange Banana for similar reasons, and then go bigger on the Auroras in particular, because these have been our main decent sized sauce tomato. I have been putting the cherries in our sauces. They are more watery, there's less flesh in them, so the sauce isn't quite as thick when we have the cherries in, but tomato is tomato, and they're all good eating. So we haven't wasted any of the cherry tomatoes, but we just can't eat. There are 4 of us, we all like tomatoes, 5 of us some of the time, all of us like tomatoes, but we just couldn't eat the quantity that were coming in from the amount we've grown. So an adjustment next year, and I think I will probably go bigger on what we didn't have enough of this year with sweet peppers. So the space in here that I'll save from not growing quite so many tomatoes is to go bigger on the sweet peppers. Speaking of peppers, they are still growing, they are still coming in. I've got, so you can just see a red one behind me. There's some Amy sweet wax are growing quite large on the plant, but still aren't ripening, so I'm just leaving those to ripen. The chilies, I have pretty much harvested all of those, dehydrated them, and I'm turning those into chili powder. We've got some Tavia still growing, so there's plenty of peppers still to come in, but we just haven't, we've been harvesting little and often, and we do use quite a lot of peppers in our cooking. So the aubergines, on the other hand, have done us really well. I think we've probably had the right amount of aubergines, and the different varieties have ripened at different times, so that's kept us up with a steady flow all through the summer. So I think I will probably go again with the aubergines. I've never saved aubergine seeds before. I need to look into that, because I know with courgettes, for example, there can be some danger around saving your own courgette seed. So I'm going to do a little bit of research on aubergine seed and see if they are worth saving, or whether I just rebuy those varieties again next year. But we've been really pleased with them, and those ones that were yellow, some of them are still yellow, but they are going purple, so they are still ripening off, and I'm hoping there's still enough light for the next couple of weeks to get them all ripe. If not, then we are where we are. We're coming to the end of the season, and just accepting that. But it's very easy, I think, to feel the colder weather coming in and kind of go into autumn and winter mode, when really, if you're a bit patient, as you can see, we've got tons of tomatoes coming in, the aubergines are still ripening, and so on. So a little bit of patience. I'm not clearing everything out of here. However, as the plants are coming to an end, a couple of the Latar tomatoes came to an end. There was clearly no more fruit that was going to ripen on them, so I have been taking those out. I did have a good tidy up in here and just left any plants that had tomatoes still to ripen on them, the space that I'm creating in here, I'm going to start bringing in some of the winter crops for the polytunnel. I'm going to pop some salad in here, although it's still quite warm. I'm a bit worried they might bolt if I put them in yet. They're still just in seed trays in the brassica cage at the moment. But I'm going to put a few salads in here and a few broccoli plants in here to overwinter, and hopefully give us some early harvests to fill the hungry gap. So I'm just going to dot those where there are spaces. I'm not going to wait till the whole place is clear and then put them in. I shall just fill them in as a space emerges as we're clearing up. So a little bit of a transition period, but we're trying to do it as a slow transition rather than a complete overhaul and start again with the next crops. We'll see how that goes, and whether that was the right approach, we'll find out. I still have, oh, I can't quite lift it high enough for you to see. Still got a watermelon, which is not quite ready. We had a couple of watermelons that were delicious and a couple that were absolutely revolting for humans. We gave them to the chickens who absolutely loved them. So clearly they are tasty chicken food, and so they weren't wasted. But yeah, it's been interesting. I might try a different variety of watermelon this year, because the first couple we took were lovely, and then since they've just not had a nice taste. So speaking of the chickens, the other thing that's happened this week is that the chickens have had an upgrade. So we had an ongoing issue because we're so exposed here in the east of England, and we have a lot of wind come through, and the tarpaulin that go over the top of the two chicken runs kept being kind of treated like a sail. The wind, particularly when Storm Amy came through, for example, and storms before that, it was getting under the tarpaulin. They're very big tarpaulins, and they were lifting as enormous sails. And the tarps are good quality. The tarps themselves are not ripping, but the bungee cords that were holding them on to the coop kept tearing. And so we were replacing those, which wasn't ideal, both from a cost and an environmental perspective. So what we've done is purchase some long guy ropes and some ground anchors, and we've stretched those across the top of the chicken runs, which will hopefully mean that when the wind does get under, there's nowhere for the tarp to go and it won't start acting like a sail. So we haven't had that tested fully yet. We haven't had another storm come through, but we're hoping that that will solve that issue and prevent us having to constantly buy new bungees and keep replacing them. The other thing we've done for the chickens is their electric fence going round the chicken run, which is 100 metres long, so it's quite a lot of chicken fence and was really power hungry. We had it hooked into the 3-strand electric fencing that goes all the way around the property and was running off the same energizer which comes out of our workshop. So it's a weighty energizer. I don't know a great deal about electric fencing, but it's a weighty energizer. But we've got all of the 3-strand electric fence going around all 6 acres of the property and down the middle of the property as well. And then we also have the nearly 100, in fact I think it is 100 metres of electric fence going around, of electric netting going around the veg plot to keep the rabbits out, and then another 100 metres that we'd put on we'd hooked into the same energizer for the chickens. And what we found was it was just netting in particular is just so power hungry, because if you think of how many strands are going around it, it was draining the energy. Solo we were only getting, when you put the sensors on, if the nets weren't on, then it was getting 10 on the 3-strand electric fencing. It was draining it right down to 1, or in some places no power at all on the 3-strand electric fencing. And we have to correct that because we have some new residents coming in the next couple of weeks, which I teased last week, and hopefully in 2 or 3 weeks we'll be able to tell you who they are. But we need the electric fence, the 3-strand electric fence working around the fields for them to be safe and contained. So we have, again, this is the royal we, Mr. H, and with some help from Wilkes, we have some power out near the chicken fence for the septic tank pump. So we have wired a separate energizer into that power and are now powering the chicken fencing purely from a separate energizer, so it's not hooked into the 3-strand electric fencing. We're going to do the same for the fencing, for the netting around the veg plot. We have some power in the gym that we can put a separate energizer and lead out cable here, and then that will mean that the 3-strand electric fencing is just powered by the big Voss energizer in the workshop. So they're all 3 on separate energizers, which should give maximum power to all 3 setups. We did look at batteries, but it was much more expensive than and because we have power close enough to run lead out cables, that was the better option for us in the end. So chicken upgrades, better protected from the foxes, especially as we go into the winter with a higher voltage going through their netting. Hopefully better protection from the wind and rain with the the guy ropes holding the tarpaulin down, and should that mean we go into another flock down, it means that they are properly protected and we are not breaking any rules, because obviously we were worried if the tarp came off and we didn't have the wherewithal to fix it there and then they're not undercover, which during flock down they really should be. Fingers crossed we don't have another one, but it does seem to be a yearly event, so we're anticipating there probably will be another flock down at some point this winter. The noise you may be able to hear in the background is Mr. H clearing, so the electric fencing is all working all around the big field now, and he is busy with the brush cutter making sure that none of the vegetation is touching that fencing to give it maximum power all of the way around. So I'm gonna, whoop, just threw the tomato across the room. I am going to harvest the rest of the ripe tomatoes. There's still plenty of green, so this is not the last harvest by any means. I'm going to harvest those. I'm going to take a few peppers. I'm going to make a tomato sauce for the freezer and then finish off the seed saving from the tomatoes. So there you go, not a bad haul. Plenty of tomatoes, a few peppers, some lipstick, some jalapenos, lots and lots of tomatoes, and some tomatillos. Now the tomatillos, with the exception of that one, which still isn't massive, I've been quite surprised this year, because last year I grew the same variety and they were this sort of size by the time they were ripening and falling off. They were tomato sized fruits, whereas this year they are teeny tiny. They still taste delicious, they are ripe, they are ready to eat. I mostly turn them into salsa, tomatillo salsa, which I absolutely love. But I don't know, was I lucky last year and they're not normally as big as I grew them? Or have I been unlucky this year and these are tiny? I've only grown them 2 years, so any tomatillo experts out there, what size would you expect your tomatillos to be? Because they seem really weeny. Plenty of them, giving us lots of good eating, but I'm just not sure why they've not grown very big. And the other thing I've noticed is just today, for the first time, we're starting to see signs of, just at this end of the polytunnel, which is probably because when we open up the polytunnel we're only opening up that door now, so perhaps it's a bit damper at this end, but these plants at this end are just starting to, I don't think it's blight, but they're just starting to show signs of a little bit of kind of mould grossness. This one was on the floor, but yeah, this kind of thing. So it's on very few tomatoes. I'll get those in the compost, but perhaps a sign that this end in particular, I might have to take some of the green ones to ripen inside and cut those down at the base. By the time we get to that end, they're still all pristine, no signs of anything nasty. And the aubergines that are all ripening, every one of them is not quite ready to pick, because when you turn it over it's not quite ripe on the other side, so I'm going to give them a bit longer. And when I look up whether you can save seed, I'm also going to look up whether, like tomatoes, you can ripen them off the plant, or whether they've got a chance to ripen on the plant, and if they don't, that's that and tough. I'm not sure with aubergines what's what. Alright, onwards. So just to finish off, I thought I'd show you this little science experiment that is the seed saving for our tomatoes. So this is a little bit of grossness that you just have to go through to save your tomato seeds, which is to scrape some seeds and jelly from inside the tomato, pop them in a little jar of water and let them do what feels very counterintuitive, which is to go mouldy. So these are just starting to mould. I'll probably leave it maybe one more day at most. I might even decide to tackle them this afternoon, but allow them to go mouldy. And then you can take those, rinse them off really well, get all the mould off them, spread them out on a bit of kitchen towel to dry, and make sure you label them. Ask me how I know. And there's your seed for next year. So we've done that. There are lots of different ways to save seed. Some people do it this way, some people do different things. We've always done it this way, and we've had really good germination rates in the years that follow. So we're going to stick to doing it the way we know. It does mean you have that science experiment on your window ledge for a couple of days. I think probably 4 or 5 days before they'll be ready total from when I did it. And that'll give us next year's harvest. So I'm going to leave it there. It's Sunday afternoon. It's about to start pouring with rain. We're going to get cosy and chill out for the afternoon. See you all next week. Bye.